Sometimes the scariest stories aren't hidden in movies or nightmares. They're buried in real life. Every strange encounter, every unexplained shadow, every whisper in the dark leaves behind a trace. Tiny clues that something is watching us from just beyond what we can understand. Tonight, we're diving into the things people weren't meant to see. Disturbing events, impossible creatures, and encounters so real that even investigators couldn't explain them. This is the iceberg. The deeper you go, the darker it gets. So turn off the lights, take a breath, and remember, some stories don't stay on the screen. They follow you. The Hopkinsville Goblins, 1955.
On the night of August 21st, 1955, something happened in the quiet farmland between Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky, that would go on to become one of the most chilling, heavily investigated, and downright bizarre encounters in American history. It's the kind of story that sounds like a campfire tale, until you remember that police officers, neighbors, and government officials all saw the aftermath for themselves. What happened that night inside the Langford family farmhouse became known as the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins encounter. And even today, almost 70 years later, it remains one of the most disturbing, inhuman encounters ever reported. The story begins just after sunset. The farmhouse belonged to Glennie Langford, and inside were her children, their spouses, and a visiting friend named Billy Ray Taylor. It was a regular warm summer evening, quiet, peaceful, the kind of night where you could hear the crickets from far away. But at around 7 p.m., Billy Ray walked outside to get water from the backyard well. That's when he saw something he could never explain. He looked up and witnessed what he described as a shimmering, glowing object streaking across the sky. It wasn't like a plane or a falling star. It moved in strange, jerky motions, and then dropped straight down into a wooded area behind the house. Billy Ray ran inside, breathless, telling everyone he'd seen some kind of spacecraft. Naturally, no one believed him. They laughed it off and went back to their evening. But that disbelief wouldn't last long. As the night became darker, the dogs began growling, low, uneasy, almost warning the family that something was wrong. The air felt heavier, as if the entire farm was holding its breath. Everyone inside sensed the change, even if they couldn't explain it. And then they heard it, a faint pattering sound outside, like tiny feet walking across gravel. At first they thought it might be an animal, but the sound wasn't random. It was slow, careful, almost curious. When the family looked out the window, they froze. Standing at the edge of the tree line was a small, humanoid figure, no more than 3 or 4 feet tall. It had a round, oversized head, enormous, glowing yellow eyes, long dangling arms, and thin legs that seemed too small to hold up its body. Its skin looked metallic, almost silver, and its ears stood straight up like pointed fins. It didn't walk like a human. It floated, bobbing slightly as it moved. The family panicked. Billy Ray and another man grabbed their guns, a shotgun and a .22 rifle. They slowly opened the front door, trying not to make noise. But before they could step outside, something leapt onto the roof with a heavy thud. The creature outside wasn't alone. Billy Ray stepped out and fired. The creature didn't fall like a normal animal. Instead, it flipped backwards in the air, almost weightless, and vanished into the dark. Another one popped its head around the corner of the house, its huge yellow eyes glowing like lanterns. Again, the men fired. Again, the creature didn't bleed, didn't cry out. It just drifted away, unharmed. The family rushed back inside, locking the doors, closing the curtains, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. But the horror wasn't over. The creatures began peering into the windows, slowly rising up, their long arms gripping the window frame, their huge eyes staring directly into the house. Glennie later said it looked like they were studying them, almost like observing animals in a cage. For the next several hours, these inhuman beings surrounded the house. They tapped on walls, scratched at doors, slid across the ground, and floated back onto the roof. One creature reached down from the roof towards Billy Ray as he stepped outside again, its long hand almost touching his hair before he fired a shot upward. Inside the house, the children cried. The adults tried to stay calm, but fear settled deep into their bones. There was no phone, no immediate help. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound felt closer. The creatures were relentless, not aggressive, but persistent, almost fascinated. This wasn't a quick scare. It was an hours-long siege. Finally, around 11 p.m., after nearly 4 hours of terror, the family decided to make a run for it. They piled into their 2 cars and sped toward the Hopkinsville police station. When they burst through the doors, they weren't calm, not collected. The entire family was terrified, shaking, pale, convinced they were going to die. This is where the story becomes impossible to dismiss. The police took them seriously. In fact, a total of more than 20 officers, including state troopers, deputies, and even military police from Fort Campbell, drove out to the farmhouse to investigate. They expected to find drunk people, teenagers playing pranks, or nothing at all. Instead, they found bullet holes all over the house, shattered window screens, and signs of a struggle. Officers reported that the family wasn't lying. They were genuinely traumatized. Some officers said the atmosphere around the farm felt strange, charged, or electric, as if something had happened there. Tracks were found. Metallic dust was discovered, and one officer claimed he saw a strange glow in the woods, but couldn't identify the source. Around 3 a.m. after the police left, the family tried to sleep, but the nightmare wasn't done. The creatures returned, tapping on windows again, floating near the roof again, until sunrise finally came. When daylight hit, the creatures vanished for good. No bodies, no footprints, no explanation. The Kelly Hopkinsville case became one of the most documented and baffling in American history. The Air Force investigated it. UFO researchers studied it for decades. Skeptics tried to explain it away, but none of their theories fit all the evidence. The creatures weren't acting like animals, or humans, or anything familiar. They didn't attack, they didn't speak. They simply watched, floated, and moved with an eerie intelligence. Even today, no one knows who or what visited that farmhouse. And perhaps the most disturbing part isn't the creatures themselves, but the fact that the family never changed their story. They gained nothing. They sought no fame. They never wanted attention. They just wanted the nightmare to be over. But the memory of those glowing eyes watching from the shadows never left them.
The Mothman Sightings, 1966, USA. In the quiet, unassuming town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, something began stirring in the shadows during the winter of 1966. A creature so strange, so alien, and so deeply wrong that even today people struggle to describe it without their voice trembling. This is not a story of legends passed down through campfire tales. These were real people, real reports, and a real chain of events that left a scar on an entire community. The story starts on November 12, 1966, in a lonely cemetery outside Clendenin. Gravediggers, tough men used to silence and darkness, were laying a new grave when a large shadow passed over them. They looked up expecting a bird, but what they saw was nothing like anything that belonged in the sky. A massive humanoid shape flew above their heads, muscular, broad-shouldered, wings stretched out like a living nightmare. It moved silently, without flapping, slipping through the air as if the sky itself pushed it forward. The men stood frozen, shovels in hand, unable to call out. It was the first sighting, and the town had no idea what was coming. Just 3 days later, on November 15th, the creature returned. This is the encounter that would carve the Mothman into American folklore forever.
Two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette, were driving near an old abandoned TNT factory on the outskirts of town. The place was already eerie on its own. Crumbling concrete structures, dark tunnels from World War II, and miles of dense forest. People avoided it at night, but the four friends were bored, curious, and young enough to think fear was optional. As they drove past one of the old igloo-shaped storage bunkers, Linda noticed something standing in the beam of the headlights. She whispered, "Stop," gripping Roger's arm. At first, it looked like a person, tall, thin, and still. But when it turned towards them, they realized it wasn't human at all. Its eyes glowed a piercing red, not like reflection, but like something burning from inside. It stood over 6 feet tall, with wings tucked behind its back, folded tight like a monstrous bird waiting to strike. The creature took a step toward the car, a slow, heavy step, and that was all it took. Roger slammed the accelerator, tires kicking gravel, heart punching his chest. The road was empty, the night quiet. And then, the creature launched into the air. Not with a leap, not with a flap. It soared straight upward, like gravity didn't apply to it. Seconds later, it was above their car, keeping pace effortlessly at over 100 miles per hour. Imagine that moment. Being chased through the dark by something that shouldn't exist, something that feels like it's studying you, not hunting, but observing. Linda later said it felt like the creature wasn't trying to hurt them. Instead, it wanted them to see it, to know it was real. The couples reached town in a panic, running into the local police station with trembling voices and wild eyes. These weren't drunk teenagers. They were respected residents, terrified out of their minds. Deputy Millard Halstead later said he could tell by their faces alone that they weren't lying. Something had shaken them to their bones. Word spread fast, and Point Pleasant changed overnight. People started hearing strange noises in the woods. Dogs vanished without a trace. Lights appeared in the sky. And always that feeling of being watched. One of the most chilling events happened to a man named Newell Cartridge, a local contractor who lived miles away from the TNT area. Late one night, his television began emitting strange static patterns he'd never seen before, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then his dog, Bandit, began whining and running frantically toward the barn outside. When Partridge stepped onto the porch, he saw 2 giant red eyes staring at him from the darkness. They weren't small like a raccoon's. They were the size of bicycle reflectors, glowing intensely, fixed on him. Bandit dashed towards the eyes, barking ferociously. Partridge called after him, but the dog didn't come back. The next morning he searched the property, but Bandit was gone. He never saw him again. When Partridge heard the Scarberry incident on the radio, especially the detail about large red eyes, he nearly dropped the receiver. It was the same creature. Throughout late November and December, sightings skyrocketed. Over 100 people claimed they saw the Mothman, perched on rooftops, standing in fields, gliding over the river, or simply lurking near homes as if drawn to human presence. Some described intense nightmares afterwards, visions of disaster, collapse, something massive and inevitable approaching. And then, the disasters began. People started reporting poltergeist activity, shadow figures, strange phone calls filled with static, and faceless men in black suits knocking on their doors asking about the creature. The town became a pressure chamber of fear and paranoia. The Mothman wasn't just a creature anymore. It was a prelude to something darker. Everything reached its nightmarish climax on December 15, 1967. The Silver Bridge, the main connection between Point Pleasant and Ohio, collapsed during rush hour traffic. 46 people died in the freezing river. It was the deadliest tragedy in the town's history. In the chaos, in the dust and screaming and twisting steel, several witnesses claimed they saw something large perched on the bridge before it fell, watching, silent, and then gone. After that night, the sightings stopped, completely. To this day, many believe the Mothman wasn't a monster, but a warning, a harbinger of disasters. Others think it was something extraterrestrial, drawn to places where tragedy is about to unfold. Some believe it was a creature feeding off fear, appearing when emotions reach their breaking point. But the truth is simple. The people of Point Pleasant weren't hallucinating. They weren't telling stories for attention. These were families, workers, police officers, teenagers, all terrified by something they couldn't understand. The Mothman didn't take anything from them. It didn't attack anyone. It just watched and then disappeared. But the real horror comes from this question, the one that keeps people awake at night. If it was a warning, why did it appear too late? And where is it watching from now?
The Dover Demon, 1977, USA. The story of the Dover Demon begins on an ordinary spring night in 1977. Ordinary, at least, until something stepped out of the darkness and stared into the lives of 3 teenagers, leaving them with a memory they would never shake. What happened in Dover, Massachusetts was brief, quiet, and without violence, yet the terror it created has lasted nearly 50 years. Because sometimes the scariest encounters are the ones that don't attack you. They simply look at you, as if studying you, wondering who you are. On the night of April 21, 1977, the first witness, a 17-year-old boy named Bill Bartlett, was driving with friends along a narrow wooded road called Farm Street. It was cold, silent, and the kind of darkness that feels thicker than usual, the kind that makes headlights look weak. Bill had his eyes on the road when something strange caught the glare of the headlights. At first, he thought it was a dog or maybe a small animal scrambling along a stone wall by the roadside. He slowed slightly, leaning forward, and that's when his heart seemed to freeze inside his chest. The creature wasn't an animal. It wasn't anything he knew. Perched on top of the stone wall was a small, pale figure, thin, bony, and crouched like a fragile insect. Its skin was a smooth, sickly peach color, stretched tight like wax over its skeleton. It had long, stick-thin limbs, almost spider-like, and tiny hands with spindly fingers pressed against the rocks. But what Bill would remember most were the eyes. 2 enormous, glassy, orange glowing eyes that reflected the headlights like they were lit from the inside. The thing didn't blink, didn't flinch. It simply watched him, its huge head turning slowly, smoothly, as though it moved on a hinge. Bill drove past it, mind blank, breath held. And then, as if a delayed wave of terror slammed into him, he shouted to his friends, "Did you see that?" But they hadn't. Only Bill had witnessed the thing, and for him, that made it even worse. When Bill got home shaking, he told his father immediately, not the kind of thing a teenager usually does. His father believed him enough to contact the police, and when Bill sat down to draw what he saw, his hand trembled uncontrollably. The sketch that emerged became the famous image known worldwide today, a small pale figure with a huge head, long limbs, and eyes too large for any earthly animal. But the Dover Demon wasn't finished. Less than 2 hours later, another teenager named John Baxter was walking home late at night. He took a wooded shortcut, something he'd done 100 times. The moon was faint behind thin clouds, and the road was empty except for the crunch of gravel under his sneakers. A small shape appeared ahead of him. At first, it looked like a kid, maybe a neighbor's younger brother. John called out to it. The figure suddenly stopped. Something about the way it moved, stiff, unsteady, like a newborn animal unsure of its limbs, told John this wasn't a child. He took a cautious step closer. The figure backed away, slowly, almost calculatingly, moving towards a gully beside the road. When it reached the bottom of the slope, John finally saw it clearly. Its head was massive, almost spherical, resting on a body that was impossibly thin. Its limbs were long, jointed wrong, bent in strange angles, and its eyes, large, empty, glowing faint yellow in the moonlight. The creature seemed frightened or uncertain, as if it didn't know what John was or if John was safe to approach. For a moment, both stood frozen, 2 beings staring across a gap of species, of understanding, of reality itself. Then, without a sound,
the creature turned and vanished into the trees. John ran home as though the forest itself were chasing him. By now, the police had 2 witnesses, hours apart, describing the exact same creature, a creature no one had ever reported in Dover before. But the demon would appear once more before disappearing forever. The next night, April 22nd, around midnight, 15-year-old Abby Brabham was riding with her boyfriend along Springdale Avenue when she spotted something by the side of the road. She leaned forward, squinting through the window. A small figure was sitting there, hunched, its knees drawn to its chest. Its skin looked pale and smooth, almost glowing slightly in the car's lights. It turned its head slowly, too slowly, and Abby's breath caught. The eyes were huge, this time glowing bright green. Abby refused to sleep that night. She told her mother she didn't see an animal, didn't see a person. She saw something that shouldn't exist. 3 sightings, within 2 miles, over 24 hours. All by different witnesses who didn't know each other's stories yet. They described the same impossible being. Pale skin, huge head, orange or green glowing eyes, long limbs, no visible mouth, nose, or ears, small, frail, human-like, but not human. After April 22nd, the Dover demon vanished. No more sightings, no tracks, no answers. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels intentional. Skeptics tried to explain it away. A baby moose, a dog, a prank. But the descriptions didn't match any known creature. A baby moose doesn't have glowing eyes the size of oranges. A dog doesn't have stick-thin arms and a bulbous head. And none of the teens were known to lie or seek attention. In fact, many refused to talk about the incident for years. Some theories say the demon was extraterrestrial, a lost visitor confused and scared, wandering the woods. Others say it was an interdimensional being that slipped through a thin place in reality. A few claim it was a mutated animal born in the darkness, something evolution quietly discarded but not before it left a single shadow on Earth. But the most haunting theory is this: the Dover demon wasn't passing through. It was exploring, learning, watching humans the way humans watch strange animals. And when it was done studying us, it simply slipped back into whatever world it came from. 3 teenagers, 1 town, and a creature that appeared for one brief moment in history, long enough to be seen, but never long enough to be understood. And maybe that is the real fear behind the Dover demon. Not that it existed, but that it might return, silently, unexpectedly, watching someone else from the side of a lonely road.
Black-eyed children encounters, 2000s to present. There is a certain kind of fear that doesn't come from monsters hiding in the woods or shadows in abandoned buildings. It comes from something much stranger, something that looks human, speaks like a child, behaves politely, yet feels completely wrong. The black-eyed children phenomena is one of the most disturbing modern encounters ever documented, not because they attack or chase or scream, but because of the way they ask, calmly, softly, coldly, and almost always in the same exact words: "Let us in." The earliest widely reported encounter appeared in the late 1990s, but the cases exploded across the world in the 2000s, stretching from the US to the UK, Australia, and even rural India. Different cultures, different witnesses, same description, same behavior, same chilling dread. This is not a creature hidden in the forest. This horror walks right up to your front door. The most famous early case came from a journalist named Brian Bethel in 1996, but it's the thousands of encounters that followed, from normal people, parents, travelers, and late-night workers, that make the black-eyed children impossible to ignore. They appear as kids between the ages of 6 and 16, pale skin, old-fashioned clothing, emotionless expression, and most unsettling of all, pitch black eyes. No iris, no whites, just 2 empty voids that swallow the light. The stories almost always begin the same way: a knock at the door late at night,
or tapping on a car window while someone waits in a parking lot. Always polite, always asking for help, and always creating a terror so deep and instinctive the witnesses can hardly explain why. One of the most terrifying modern cases happened in Vermont. A couple was awakened around 2 a.m. by soft knocking. Just a gentle tap, tap, tap. Barely enough to wake them. The husband opened the door, expecting maybe a lost traveler or a neighbor with an emergency. Instead, he found 2 children, a boy and a girl, around 8 or 9 years old, standing perfectly still in the snow without coats. "Can we come in? Our parents will be here soon." The husband felt in immediate dread. He didn't know why. There was nothing threatening about them, no weapons, no screams, just 2 shivering kids. He hesitated, then reluctantly let them in. The moment they stepped inside, every light in the house flickered. The children sat together on the couch with their heads down, whispering to each other in a language the couple didn't recognize. The wife offered them blankets, but the children refused, saying only, "They will be here soon." When the husband finally got a good look at their faces, that's when the panic hit. Their eyes, completely black. Not dark brown, not dilated. Black, like polished stones. The children noticed him staring and spoke in unison, "May we use the bathroom?" The wife pointed down the hall. As soon as the children vanished around the corner, her nose began to bleed. Then the power went out completely. Both adults sat in silence, terrified, listening to soft footsteps in the hallway. When the children returned, the girl said calmly, "Our parents are here." She opened the front door and left with the boy. Outside, through the snowstorm, the couple saw 2 tall, thin figures waiting at the end of the driveway. Dark coats, no faces visible. The children got into the car, the figures followed. The vehicle drove away without headlights. The couple's cat died later that week. The husband developed chronic nosebleeds. Their health deteriorated for months. And they swear, absolutely swear, the children weren't human. Another chilling modern encounter came from Oregon in 2009. A man sleeping in his car at a rest stop woke to tapping on the window. 2 boys were standing outside, around 12 years old. The taller one said, "We need a ride." But something about their voice made the man's skin crawl, flat, emotionless, like a recording. The kids kept insisting, "We can't get in unless you say it's okay. Please let us in. Just unlock the door. Just open up." The man realized the boys weren't blinking. Their faces were expressionless, and their eyes were solid black. He put the car in reverse and sped out of the rest stop, heart racing, throat dry, convinced that if he had unlocked the door, he wouldn't have survived. Then there are the cases from the UK, where black-eyed children have been seen wandering rural roads at night, standing silently at the edge of forests, or appearing suddenly in front of cars. Drivers often report strange electrical malfunctions, headlights dimming, engines stalling, phones dying instantly. One British woman described walking home after a late shift when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw a little girl standing under a street lamp. The girl asked politely, "Can you walk me home?" But the woman said something in her mind, something primal, told her to run. The girl's voice was wrong, too flat, too perfect. When the woman backed away, the girl stepped into the light. Black eyes, unblinking. And then the girl asked again, this time with a strange edge in her voice. "Please, I can't come unless you help me." The woman ran. She didn't look back. She didn't sleep for 3 nights.
What makes these cases unique is the pattern. Black-eyed children don't force their way in. They always ask permission. They're polite, patient, persistent, almost as if some unspoken rule binds them. Witnesses report overwhelming dread when near them, a feeling that goes beyond fear. It's instinct, the same kind of internal alarm humans feel when they sense a predator. Some researchers believe they're feeding on fear. Others think they resemble classic depictions of alien-human hybrids. A few say they're demonic entities bound by invitation rules. But the most unsettling theory is the one eyewitnesses whisper about. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to enter our world, and they need someone to invite them. Every encounter ends the same way. The victims escape, refuse to let them in, or black out from fear. But no one knows what happens to the people who do open the door. If any did. The black-eyed children phenomena continues today. New sightings appear every year. In suburbs, on highways, in isolated rural towns. The children always have the same pale skin, the same unsettling politeness, and the same request. Let us in. So if you ever hear a knock at night, if you ever see two small silhouettes standing on your porch long after midnight, if they speak politely, never blinking, asking again and again, whatever you do, don't open the door.
The Fresno Nightcrawler sightings, 1990s present. Some encounters shake you because they're violent, monstrous, or loud, but others, the ones that linger the longest, are quiet, eerie, unexplainable. They make you question what our world hides in its blind spots. The Fresno Nightcrawler is exactly that kind of mystery, a creature that defies shape, logic, biology, and fear itself. It doesn't scream, it doesn't chase, it simply walks. And somehow that makes it even worse, because the things that don't behave like predators are often the things we understand the least. The story begins not in a forest or desert, but in a backyard, in the late 1990s in the quiet neighborhoods of Fresno, California. The first man to record the creature, known publicly only as Jose, never wanted fame, attention, or stories written about him. In fact, he refused to even show his face on camera afterward. He wasn't a ghost hunter, not a paranormal believer, not a storyteller, just an ordinary man who installed CCTV cameras because his dogs kept barking at night. One cold evening, after being woken again by frantic barking, Jose checked the surveillance footage. At first, he didn't see anything unusual, just the pale glow of the yard, the stillness of the fence, the gentle sway of the trees. But then, something glided into the frame. It wasn't a person, not an animal, not even close. Two long, white, impossibly thin legs, only legs, with no visible torso, walked slowly across his lawn. No arms, no head, just a small upper piece like fabric or bone, and then long legs that moved with a ghostly smoothness. Each step was fluid, gliding, like the creature weighed nothing. It was tall, 5 feet, maybe more, yet unbelievably skinny, like a living pair of pants walking on its own. The movement wasn't mechanical, but it wasn't human either. It was too smooth, too weightless, as if gravity didn't quite apply to it. Jose froze. He played the footage again and again, disbelief turning into dread. Then a second creature entered the frame, smaller, childlike, walking right behind the first. For a moment, they seemed to move in perfect sync, almost floating. The creatures didn't disturb anything,
They didn't break into the house. They didn't even look around. They just walked and disappeared off-screen. Jose called the police, not out of fear of aliens or the supernatural, but because he thought someone was messing with him. But when officers arrived, they couldn't even describe what they were seeing. They told him the footage was too strange to classify. They had no explanation. None. Local news picked it up. The video spread. People argued, was it CGI, a puppet, a prank? But experts analyzing the video noticed something bizarre. The creature's movement had no signs of digital editing, and the way its legs bent didn't match any known animal, puppet structure, or human gait. More sightings followed, not just in Fresno, but all over California. And strangely, the creatures always appeared in simple, open environments. Forest trails, suburbs, farmlands. Always quiet, always walking, always weightless. One of the most disturbing encounters happened in Yosemite National Park, captured by park security cameras. Two figures walked along a dirt path in the middle of the night, their pale bodies glowing softly in the infrared light. The larger one moved first, tall, smooth, gliding legs stretching unnaturally with each step. Then the small one appeared, again following closely behind like a parent leading a child. The creatures didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't react, just passed through the forest like ghosts wearing the shape of something half-formed. Rangers who reviewed the footage privately admitted the creatures didn't resemble any animal known in the region or anywhere. Even stranger, despite walking on dirt and soft ground, the Nightcrawlers left no footprints, not a single indent. Witnesses started coming forward with stories of seeing tall, thin figures crossing roads at night, gliding across fields, or standing motionless under streetlights before drifting away. Some described them as cloth-like, as though made of fabric or stretched skin. Others said their presence felt calming, not evil, but deeply alien, something not meant for our world. And then came the theory that changed everything. Local Native American tribes recognized the creatures, not as monsters, but as ancient beings. According to oral traditions passed down for generations, beings resembling the Nightcrawler were protectors of the land, peaceful, silent watchers who appeared during times of imbalance, creatures with long legs that allowed them to travel great distances and see across nature. Not human, not animal, something older. Some elders even claimed carvings depicting long-legged spirits existed long before cameras, long before the town of Fresno even existed. They were described as messengers, guardians connecting the earth with higher realms. But if they truly were ancient guardians, then why did they suddenly appear on camera after thousands of years? What were they watching? What were they warning us about? Modern skeptics argue the Nightcrawler must be a puppet on strings or a person in a costume, but no one has ever recreated the movement perfectly. Professional special effects artists have tried and failed to replicate the unnatural floating gait. The joints bend wrong, the legs stretch too far, the upper portion is too rigid yet too alive to be a simple prop. And for all the claims of fakery, no one, not once, has stepped forward admitting to a hoax. No prankster, no filmmaker, no attention seeker. Nothing. But perhaps the most unsettling detail is this. Despite all the videos, all the witnesses, and all the theories, no one has ever seen the Nightcrawlers up close. No one has heard them. No one has found their tracks. No one knows where they come from or where they go. They appear, they walk, they vanish. Always silent, always drifting, always watching. Some believe they're scouting Earth for something. Some say they're lost spirits searching for home. Others think they're interdimensional, beings who slipped into our world through thin cracks in reality. But the most haunting theory comes from those who felt no fear when they saw the Nightcrawlers, only a deep, instinctive sense that they were not meant to be interrupted, as if the creatures were performing a task, a ritual, a duty older than human memory. Maybe they are guardians. Maybe they are warnings. Or maybe, just maybe, they are explorers, quietly measuring our world before something much larger follows. Whatever the truth is, the Fresno Nightcrawler remains one of the purest, strangest mysteries of modern times. A creature with no face, no voice, and no aggression. Only those long, whisper-thin legs slipping through the darkness. And if you're ever outside late at night, in a quiet field or an empty parking lot, you might just see them gliding by. Silent, weightless, watching.
The Enfield Monster, 1973, USA. If you ask the people of Enfield, Illinois about the spring of 1973, some of them will still lower their voices, glance at the tree line, and say, "Something walked through here, and it wasn't human." The story begins with a man named Henry McDaniel, an ordinary resident living on the edge of town, where the fields stretch long and empty at night. But on April 25th, his life and the town's quiet reputation would change forever. It was just past 9 p.m. when Henry heard a strange scratching on his front door. At first, he dismissed it as a dog or a strayed animal, but the sound returned, louder, slower, and unnervingly deliberate. Henry, suspicious and irritated, grabbed a flashlight and his revolver before walking to the entrance. The moment he cracked the door open, the beam of his flashlight froze over something that made him stumble backwards. There, just outside his steps, stood a creature unlike anything he or anyone had ever described before. It had 3 legs, or at least appeared to balance on 3 appendages that bent in unnatural angles. Its skin was a pale, rubbery gray, and its small, glowing red eyes stared directly into Henry's. The creature was short, only about 4.5 feet tall, but its movements were stiff and puppet-like, as if its joints didn't fit the way ours do. Henry later said it looked like something straight out of a nightmare. When he raised his gun, the creature hissed, an eerie, sharp sound like steam bursting from pipes, and began hopping away faster than Henry thought possible. He fired 4 shots, hitting it at least once, but it didn't slow down. It bounded off like a kangaroo with 3 legs, vanishing into the darkness near the railroad tracks. Henry reported the creature to the police, who expected a simple wild animal case. But when they arrived, they found deep claw-like marks on the doorframe, strange footprints shaped like dog prints but with more digits, and impressions in the soft earth that matched Henry's 3-legged hopping description. Officers didn't immediately dismiss the claim, which only fueled the growing unease in the town. Word spread quickly, and soon locals began whispering about the Enfield Horror, a name that stuck. 2 young men, monster hunters as they proudly called themselves, arrived in Enfield days later to investigate. They claimed to have seen the creature darting between trees near the railroad embankment. One of them fired a shot, and the thing let out a scream described as like a baby wailing mixed with a pig squeal. But again, it escaped, as if the creature simply refused to be caught or killed. That same week, a young boy reported seeing a similar figure outside his home, staring from the shadows before scuttling off on its awkward limbs. The sheriff, tired of the increasing chaos, dismissed the hunters and tried calming the town, but the fear had already taken root. Every night, residents kept their lights on, glancing out windows, checking around their homes for anything strange. The idea that something was lurking, something fast, intelligent, and disturbingly silent, was impossible to shake off. To this day, the Enfield Monster remains one of America's most bizarre cryptid sightings. Unlike Bigfoot or other humanoid creatures, the Enfield Monster didn't resemble anything in the known animal kingdom. It didn't walk like a human, didn't sound like a human, and didn't react like any ordinary creature. The descriptions were consistent. In the physical evidence, the prints, the claw marks, the frantic testimonials still haunt the case. Skeptics tried to label it as a wild dog, a kangaroo, or a misidentified wandering creature, but Henry McDaniel never changed his story. Even decades later, he maintained that what he saw that night was not from this world. If they find it, they'll realize it wasn't no animal. It was something else, something that came here by mistake or maybe on purpose. And that's what makes the Enfield Monster so chilling. The idea that something slipped into our world for a brief moment, moving between houses, staring through windows, hopping through fields at impossible speeds, and then disappeared, leaving only questions behind. Whether an alien, a cryptid, or something even stranger, its presence in 1973 left a scar on Enfield that's still felt today. Even now, locals say that on quiet nights near the old railroad tracks, you might hear that same metallic hiss drifting across the grass. And if you do, you'd better stay inside, because some visitors don't come to be discovered. They come to observe, and they don't always leave.
The Gorbals Humanoid Incident, 1954, Scotland. In the early 1950s, Glasgow's Gorbals district was a place of crumbling tenements, heavy fog, and soot-darkened streets, an area where poverty was real, but imagination was even more powerful. Children told stories to scare each other. Adults whispered about bad omens, and superstition ran deep in the old brick alleys. But nothing prepared the community for what happened in 1954, when a wave of sightings, strange, panicked, and unbelievably consistent, rattled the neighborhood to its core. The story begins on a cold September evening, when two young boys ran into a police station, pale and shaking. They claimed something was lurking around the southern necropolis, a massive Victorian graveyard filled with towering monuments, twisting paths, and shadow-drenched corners. The boys said they had seen a tall, thin humanoid with glowing red eyes moving between the gravestones. Its skin was ashy, almost corpse-like, and its limbs were far too long for a human. They described it as like a man, but not a man. Something twisted, hollow, and impossibly silent. News spread through the neighborhood faster than smoke. By the next afternoon, nearly 200 children from the Gorbals flocked to the graveyard, armed with sticks, knives, and even makeshift spears. They weren't playing, they were hunting. What they were searching for would later be called the Gorbals Humanoid, a creature no one could fully explain, but everyone swore was real. The children said the humanoid stalked the cemetery after sunset, towering over the gravestones and watching silently from behind mausoleums. Some claimed it moved with a strange, jerking gait, as if its joints bent the wrong direction. One group swore it heard it whispering, in a voice that didn't sound human at all, thin, raspy, like wind moving through a hollow pipe. Another boy said the creature had been seen dragging something across the ground, something heavy enough to leave marks in the dirt. When adults heard the commotion, they assumed it was hysteria, an overactive imagination shared among kids. But then the reports started coming in from grown men, workers heading home late, people cutting through the cemetery to save time. Several adults described seeing a tall figure standing unnaturally still among the graves, watching them approach before silently stepping backward into the darkness. They said its red eyes were the only thing that didn't disappear when it moved. Police quickly intervened, sweeping through the southern necropolis with lanterns and dogs, trying to dispel the rumors. But what they found didn't help. Trampled grass, unusual footprints, and strange markings etched into the dirt, almost like symbols or claw marks. Officers couldn't explain the tracks, too large for dogs, too irregular for humans, and too deep for a prank. For the next few nights, groups of children continued gathering at the cemetery gates, convinced the humanoid would return. Some said it only appeared when the fog rolled in, its body half hidden, but its glowing eyes unmistakable. Others claimed it lurked near the back wall of the necropolis, close to the industrial zone where smoke and darkness merged. Many insisted it was feeding, though no one could agree on what it ate. Some said rats, others whispered something more disturbing. Psychologists, politicians, and journalists tried to explain the panic away. Some blamed comic books, others blamed folklore,
and still others blamed the dark environment the children grew up in. But these explanations failed to address one chilling detail. Why did so many children, who hadn't talked to each other beforehand, describe the creature the same way? The same height, the same skin, the same burning red eyes, the same unnatural silence. It was too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Decades later, some of the now grown children still swear the humanoid was real. They say they remember the fear, the coldness of the cemetery, the way the fog seemed to swallow sound. Many admit they didn't believe in monsters before that night. But after seeing the thing standing near the gravestones, completely motionless except for its heaving breath, they changed their minds. Some believe the creature was a ghost or a demon tied to the graveyard. Others think it was an extraterrestrial, drawn to the isolation and gloom of the necropolis. A few even speculate it was something that slipped between worlds, a traveler caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, wandering among the dead until the living discovered it. The Gorbals humanoid was never captured, never photographed, and never fully explained. But the panic it caused was so intense, so real, that it led to national discussions about children, media, and fear. Even now, the southern necropolis carries an unsettling reputation. Locals say that late at night, when the fog hangs low and the old stone monuments creak in the wind, you might feel like you're being watched. And if you see a pair of glowing red eyes between the graves, you should turn around, slowly, because some things aren't meant to be seen twice.
Kelly Cahill Encounter, 1993, Australia. In August of 1993, on a cold Australian night when the highways were empty and the countryside was wrapped in that eerie silence only rural darkness can create, a woman named Kelly Cahill experienced something that would change her life forever. Her encounter remains one of the most disturbing and well-documented humanoid sightings in modern history, not because she was the only witness, but because multiple families reported the same terrifying beings on the very same road on the very same night without knowing each other existed. Kelly was driving home with her husband from a friend's house near the Dandenong foothills, a place where fog rolls low and the sky feels too big, like it's waiting for something to break through. They were exhausted, talking about small things, when Kelly noticed a strange, bright object hovering low over a paddock on the right side of the highway. At first, she thought it was a spotlight or maybe lights from a distant building. But then it moved. Not drifting, not swaying. It glided, smooth and controlled, pulsing with white-orange light like it was breathing. Before she could point it out, the car was flooded with a blinding flash. Everything went white for a second. Then the object vanished behind the trees. Kelly brushed it off as some kind of aircraft, even though deep down, something felt wrong. The air felt heavier, colder, like the night itself was holding its breath. A few minutes later, they rounded a bend and saw something impossible. A massive circular craft sitting silently in an open clearing. A dark shape with a glowing rim hovering inches above the grass. Kelly felt a jolt of fear twist in her stomach. She had always been curious about extraterrestrial stories, but nothing prepares you to actually see something that shouldn't exist. Her husband slowed the car as they passed the clearing. The craft was enormous, big enough to swallow a house. Kelly felt a strange, warm sensation spreading through her chest, as if invisible hands were pushing against her. For a moment, she thought she might faint. Then the feeling vanished just as quickly as it came. But the nightmare wasn't over. As they drove further, they saw a second craft, smaller, glowing brightly, and this time there were people pulled over at the side of the road. Multiple cars, multiple families. People standing outside, staring at the sky like they were hypnotized. Kelly's husband stopped the vehicle. Against all logic and fear, Kelly stepped out. She wasn't alone. A young couple from another car had also gotten out just as confused and frightened. No one knew each other. No one was speaking. The air was thick with electricity. Not a sound, not a breeze, not an insect. Just silence so complete it felt like pressure on the ears. That's when Kelly noticed them. Across the clearing, half hidden in the dark grass, were figures. Tall, slender, black silhouettes. At least 6 of them. Humanoid, but wrong. Very wrong. They were impossibly thin, like sticks, Kelly later said, and their arms were too long, nearly reaching their knees. Their heads were large, with deep-set, red-orange eyes that glowed faintly, not with reflection, but with their own inner light. One of them took a step forward. Kelly felt her knees tremble. The creature moved with unnatural smoothness, almost gliding rather than walking. The others followed behind it in perfect synchronicity, not like individuals, but like parts of the same organism. One of the men in the group yelled, "What do you want?" His voice cracked, echoing across the clearing. The creatures didn't respond with words. Instead, Kelly felt something grip her mind, a sudden wave of panic, like her brain was being squeezed. She clutched her head, stumbling backward. The man fell to his knees. Another woman screamed. Then everything went silent again. Kelly felt a pressure in her chest, hot, burning, and paralyzing. Her vision blurred, her ears rang. Something was happening. She remembered the sensation of being pulled, but not with hands, more like her body was weightless, drifting upward. The world tilted, the lights around her warped, like stretching like liquid. She tried to shout, but nothing came out. And then, darkness. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the car, shaking violently. Her husband was gripping the wheel, pale and sweating. Neither of them remembered getting back inside, starting the engine, or driving away. The clock on the dashboard showed an hour had passed, but the drive home should have only taken minutes. Kelly felt sick. Her stomach churned, her clothes were damp with sweat, and under her navel she found a strange triangular burn mark, as if something hot and sharp had touched her skin. Her husband had marks too, long scratches on his chest that looked almost surgical. The next day, Kelly discovered something even chilling. The other families, the ones parked on the side of the road, had also experienced the missing time, the intense fear, the glowing humanoids, and the same strange burns. They described the creatures exactly as she did, right down to their glowing eyes and spidery limbs. None of them had met before. None of them had compared stories, yet their accounts matched perfectly. One woman reported blackouts for days afterwards. Another man claimed he woke up with small puncture wounds on his ankles. All of them felt watched for weeks, waking up in the middle of the night certain that something was standing in their rooms. Kelly herself was plagued by nightmares. Tall silhouettes with burning eyes standing over her bed, whispering thoughts directly into her mind. She heard strange noises outside her house at night, saw flashes of orange light from the woods behind her home, and felt an unshakable sense of being observed. Investigators later called it one of the most credible multi-witness humanoid encounters in modern history. No drugs, no hallucinations, no shared delusion, just raw, unexplained fear, physical evidence, and memories that didn't fit into any logical category. The humanoids were never seen again, at least not publicly, but Kelly believes they weren't finished. She once said, "When they looked at you, it wasn't curiosity, it was ownership." And even today, when she speaks about the encounter, there's a tremble in her voice, as if those tall, slender beings with burning eyes are still out there in the dark Australian countryside, waiting for the next quiet highway on the next unsuspecting night to choose their next witness.